What's going on, y'all, and welcome back to another Epic 7 video. Today I want to help you guys pick and choose which limited characters from this collaboration you need the most, because right now it just went live. I want to get to as many of y'all as possible because unfortunately with how fast Smilegate is pushing out limited characters, you're gonna have to pick and choose unless you are either whaling out, able to spend some money, or even playing a long time and saving up a lot of bookmarks. But most of y'all that are newer, returning players, you probably don't have enough bookmarks to carry or pull everything, especially if you play during the summer and picked up Lethe, Summer Lulika, Summer Charlotte, etc. One other thing too, guys, keep in mind when you're watching this video or when you're summoning that next week already, we're going to be getting the continuation or a follow-up of the ReZero banner. I'm not sure how they're going to implement it with this group banner thing, but they will be overlapping, meaning they will be available at the same time. It's already coming as of next week unless they change something. So just keep that in the back of your mind that Emilia and Rambo will be available as well. So make sure you guys determine which ones you need the most, because you're going to have to pick and choose unless you get extremely lucky. And that's what I'm here to help you with. So let's break it down. Okay guys, let's jump straight into it, starting from left to right. I'll talk about each individual unit, break down their strengths, weaknesses, how they're shaping up in the current meta to help you guys decide, as well as if they received any buffs, where they're mainly used, if they got stronger or weaker as time progressed. Because remember, this is the, third or maybe fourth Guilty Gear rerun. We've had a lot of this. We know where these characters lie, at least for people that have been playing a long time. So starting with Baiken. Baiken is primarily a Banshee farmer. Now, there's always exceptions, guys. I remember especially when she came out, people tried her in like PvP, Guild Wars, things like that, and she was pretty good. But nowadays, if you try to use her in RTA, especially at the higher levels, you're not going to have the best time. There's just so many better units that fulfill that kind of thief role in terms of like openers and damage dealing. I wouldn't recommend using her there unless you just know you're going into it and using her for fun. And that's kind of just Baiken as a whole if you want to use her for PvP. She's not amazing there. Make sure if you're going to try to use her there, you understand that there's way better options. But this is a video game, so in this entire video, remember, when I talk about meta, min-maxing, and things like that, determine if that's the type of player you are. Because if you're not trying for legend, if you're not going for high level PvP, guys, then just base my suggestions, but also balance it with what you guys want personally for fun. Who do you like in general based on lore, playability, looks, whatever that might be. Okay, so keep that in the back of your mind on top of things. So Baiken, not great for PvP, but the best Banshee farmer in my opinion still to this day. Least investment resource requirements to one-shot the Banshee. And the reason we want to one-shot Banshee, if you aren't aware, guys, is because if you try to take it slow and just like auto her or slowly, she does a lot of like split forms if you don't kill her quickly, and it just makes the run a lot longer, or you could possibly fail it. Baiken, with her the way her skills work, she gets like 2 big nuke style abilities. You use that in tandem with high crit damage and things like Daydream Joker, and she's the best at one-shotting Banshee with least investment of resources. Now, is that important in this day and age in 2023? In my opinion, no. On top of that too, next week we're going to be getting the ReZero collaboration, like I mentioned at the start of the video, and you're going to get a free unit called Ram, who may not be as easy to one-shot with as Baiken, but good enough if you guys don't mind investing into her, and she's free. So once again, Baiken, best Banshee farmer, but the fact that there's a lot of other options, there's a lot of restrict options too. You don't have to one-shot Banshee nowadays. You can also restrict her and gives you some extra time to kill her before she does her splits. There's other one-shot units that I'm not even mentioning here that you guys might have access to. They just require more investment than Baiken, but if you guys, I wouldn't recommend spending up to 600 bookmarks or whatever it might be to try to get her if she's just for Banshee, okay? So that's my ultimate decision. You don't really need her overall, even for hunts like Banshee, and for PvP, not amazing. So only pull her if you really like her and you just know that you're gonna, want her for like that farming spot. Now, talking about her artifact, guys, Torn Sleeve, I actually haven't had this artifact since its initial release. Didn't get it the first time around, never cared to get it in the follow-ups, even with powder. The main selling point of this artifact, I think, it's not even for Baiken, it's for Hollow Trials. There's some of you that like to do a lot of PvE. There's a lot of times you can slap this on a thief that may not have bleeds, or you want additional bleeds, and if the week allows for it, right, setting up a bleed will give you extra damage. But there's some like offshoot things like that. But Torn Sleeve in general, not an amazing artifact, definitely not a must-have by any means. So don't put this into consideration like to make Baiken a more exciting pull. Torn Sleeve not needed at all, but if you get it, hey, there's definitely uses for it. Now moving on to Dizzy, guys. Dizzy at the start of the game, or start of the collaboration release, the first year she was run, insanely powerful. You probably heard about it, how strong she was. She shaped the control meta, she shaped the meta in general, but nowadays she's definitely fallen off. There's better control units out there, and she just has a lack of strip, or other units now that Smilegate has given in their kits are a lot more self-sufficient and things like that. That being said, Dizzy still has some potential. I still always see people try to bust her out here and there depending on the matchup, but all things, unless she gets a buff or an exclusive equipment, all things considered, she's not in the best spot overall. There's better units for PvP, and in PvE, I haven't really seen too many reason to bring her, as there's better options there too. So Dizzy, definitely a unit that's been power crept. Other units are better for that spot, but just be careful, guys, because if you like her, you want to pull for her, and then additionally she gets buffed or gets an exclusive equipment, because remember, both of those are on the table now. Jacko, who we're going to talk about soon, has gotten buffs. We've gotten exclusive equipments for Milim and Shuna, I believe. So just be careful, right? Smilegate has shown that they will give buffs and exclusive equipment to these limited characters, even when they're not being run on the banner. So as for now, guys, unless Dizzy gets something, though, not in the best spot, only pull for her if you really like her. It's very similar to Baiken, but maybe even less utility right now if you want. She doesn't really fulfill the best in slot role for anything, at least from what I've seen. Now, Necro and Undine, same thing for Torn Sleeve, guys. I've seen some players try to cool off or pull off some cool stuff with this artifact, but same thing with Torn Sleeve. I've never pulled for it. I still don't have it. I'm still not even going to spend powder on it. The mage artifact spot is just so competitive. You have Tagahel's book for PvP, even PvE, and then for other PvE stuff, I use things like Etika's Scepter. I've never really found a need for this, but if you guys want to be a collectionist, maybe you have some cool brainstorm ideas, you want to try this out, go for it, but definitely not something that is must-have by any means. Now, next up, guys, we have Elphelt. Now, Elphelt is primarily a PvP unit, but I think her best thing that we want to talk about is going to be her artifacts. But before we get to there, Elphelt in the current state of the game, she's probably better off than like Dizzy for sure. I still see players that love Elphelt user, and sometimes I still have to ban her because she can be very powerful. But in terms of that kind of aggressive sort of debuff opener that does good damage too, I think same thing. I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point, guys. There's better units for the role. Smilegate, when they keep on bringing newer characters out, other units obviously fulfill those roles and have something more to bring to the table than Elphelt does in particular. But if you like her, and if you like her kit, and you think the playstyle where you set up those sleeps, you open for your team, and then hopefully provide like big defense breaks as well as some good damage, then she's definitely viable. She's not a weak unit by any means. There's just better units that fill that kind of spot and role. Now, the reason I want to talk jump straight to the artifact, though, is this artifact still is very, very strong. For PvP, I haven't seen it be insanely amazing, just because, like I said, with mages, ranger artifact spot is very, very crowded, mainly guiding light, but there's more and more that are popping up. But primarily for PvE, guys, this artifact is still the only one that provides like a defense break, and for just consistency and things like that. I think this is definitely, especially in comparison to the Torn Sleeve and Necro and Undine, Ms.Confille, however you want to say it, is very, very strong, and I definitely think you should pick up at least one with powder, because just for PvE stuff that you guys might be doing later down the line, any type of PvE mode, having that extra defense break, or a defense break period, depending on who you use it on, is very strong. Okay, so Ms.Confille, very unique, very powerful. I would consider putting Elphelt in your 3 pool just for the artifact alone, but I'll let you guys decide that ultimately. Now, last but not least, boys, we have Jacko, who is probably the strongest unit of the bunch, and probably even strongest, including if we talk about Rem and Emilia. So keep that in mind, okay, guys? Jacko just got buffed, and for PvP specifically, she's probably the strongest unit. It's not even probably. She is the strongest unit of the bunch as of right now. Her buffs actually made her incredibly powerful. The Chains of Chiron effect is just so strong now. It's extremely powerful. You get 3 turns of just debuffs, and they included like very powerful ones in there. On top of that, she just does way more. I can't remember exactly what they gave her, but she does so much damage. She provides Chains of Chiron. She is a problem unit in the current state of the game. Now, recently with Moonlight Landy, Navy Captain Landy coming out, I think Cleave is taking a hit in terms of viability, but it's still too soon to say where things are really ending up. Just understand, if we were to talk about Jacko like before Landy's release, she was really, really powerful. She had like not too many counters, and when you set up the field correctly, she was extremely strong and fun to use. So probably the strongest unit of the bunch, and definitely the strongest PvP unit of the bunch, overall. So those of you that like to play cleave, that like to play fast, aggressive, especially with some debuffs on top of that, then definitely consider picking up Jacko. Now, before I give my final conclusion on like my recommendations on which 3 to pick, guys, let's talk about her artifact. It's a very, very strong artifact, especially for Jacko, but I don't see too many other units use this. So in terms of universality, is that a word? In terms of universal usage, it's not the end of the world if you don't get this. Very strong for her, maybe one of the best artifacts for her, but there's always other artifacts that can work, maybe just not as well. But you have artifacts like Merciless Glutton. You still just slap on something like Portrait of the Saviors or Symbol if it's not being used on someone else. But that being said, if we're going to pull for Jacko, we might as well try to get her artifact because it is very strong for her. So with Jacko and her artifact both being good, guys, I would definitely pick Jacko as one of our ultimate picks. Last thing I'll say on her before I decide on the other 2 or help you guys decide on the other 2, it's really just Jacko. If you're not a cleave style player or if you don't take PvP seriously, then you may want to just pick other units that you might like more. But in terms of how powerful she is, in terms of how powerful her artifact is, I definitely would recommend probably the #1 recommended for just you guys in general. So Jacko, we're going to take up a spot there. I highly recommend Elphelt just because you can get Ms.Confille, right? Either through the artifact pity, maybe you'll get it randomly, or get it with powder. You definitely want to get one of these if you want to play some PvE later. Very unique and very powerful artifact. And then last but not least, just go back and replay what I talked about with Baiken and Dizzy. Once again, Baiken primarily a Banshee one-shotter. Dizzy kind of in a rough spot at the moment. She definitely still has some utility, being like an AoE unit, especially for areas like PvE potentially. Has powerful debuffs. Maybe still powerful in areas like Abyss. But overall, there's just so many other units right now. And for time for PvP control, there's way better units for the spot. So once again, these 2 artifacts aren't amazing. So just pick whichever one you like best. All right, guys, I think we do have time to quickly talk about Emilia. I'll give my quick take. That way you guys can use these in consideration on who you guys want to pick up or maybe just save bookmarks on. But Emilia in the current state of the game, still pretty good, but nowhere as powerful as she used to be. She does have a unique kit, though. Spirit's Blessing, if you guys you want to push up a little Queen Charlotte, for example, anything like that, give them attack up with a combat readiness. She's strong. We just have units nowadays like on mid that people tend to opt for, or if we want to have a more durable, just more sustaining Soul Weaver, we'll go with units like Destina that also have options of both push and then more healing and revive, for example. Emilia's kind of just in a rough spot where there's other units that either fulfill her role better, but you know, there's always trade-offs as in your kits. But overall, Emilia just not the strongest Soul Weaver at the moment. Like I mentioned, there's units like Amid, units like Destina that people opt to use instead because in the current meta, they may bring different strength to the table that are more necessary in the current state of the game. But still, never a bad pick. But more importantly, guys, I would say the main reason or main selling point for Emilia is actually her artifact, Guardian Ice Crystals. I'll put that up on the screen while we talk about it. Guardian Ice Crystals is one of the strongest Soul Weaver artifacts still to this day. I wish I had more of these. I only pick up 1 every single time it rolls around because I get unlucky with artifacts, but I just buy 1 with powder. But I wish I had a ton of these max limit broken. They're so strong for PvP. They give a stat boost and effect resist, and the out of turn just healing, especially that you can use this on different units as well at the same time, makes it extremely powerful and one of the best artifacts for Soul Weavers, bar none. So if anything, the main reason to pull Emilia in the current state of the game, unless you love her because of how cool she is in the anime, her artifact is just incredibly good. So you guys might want to save some bookmarks or at least save some powder. Set that aside for next week. Now, next up, guys, let me go ahead and hover over to Rem, and we'll talk about her. So last but not least, we have Rem, and if we don't consider artifacts in terms of pull priority, I would actually rate Rem the 2nd behind Jacko. Very high up on the overall collaboration pull list, just because she's very strong right now. #1, because with Jacko being so strong, Rem has gotten more use because she's a great Jacko counter, at least one of them. In terms of just being able to combat what Jacko wants to do, Rem is pretty good at that. She's been used in PvP a lot in the past, but just like all the other collaboration units, has kind of fallen off where people have used other units in place of her, in terms of like those slow bruiser counter style units, but now she's coming back because of Jacko and her unique properties, especially things like the demon mode. Now, not only that, guys, Rem I rate really highly because she's also, even if you don't use her to fight PvP like against Jackos, she's very strong as well in PvE, especially in things like Wyvern. She's one of the best. I even use her right now. Wyvern one-shotting, Rem does it very well, not too hard to gear. Just really strong unit overall. So I rate Rem very highly, but let's quickly talk about her artifact. Rem's artifact is Azure Comet, not really the best overall. It can be decent. I've seen people use it on Rem, but typically you're going to want to use something like a Sigurd's Scythe. If you're using Rem to fight, Jacko and watchign more of that bruiser role. I have seen it used on units like Rem, maybe even, Rimuru, or even Strays, units that can guarantee a kill to get that combat readiness boost. You get the free crit chance on top of that, but overall there's just way better artifacts, especially for warriors, for Strays in particular. One of the power creep artifacts is like Benimar's Tachi, which is just so much better for him than anything like Azure Comet. So don't use it as a strength or a reason to pull for. It's not a must-have artifact by any means. Instead, Rem is just very strong on her own. All right, guys, let's go ahead and recap everything super fast. Remember, this is a video game at the end of the day, so if you're not an endgame PvP sweaty player, all the PvP stuff I talked about in terms of the current meta and min-maxing, you can disregard all that. If you're more of a PvE or collector, remember things I said like hunts, in terms of Rem, Baiken being very good at hunts, Wyvern and Banshee respectively. You have Dizzy, who is maybe he's good at Abyss, but just pick whichever one you guys like most based on looks, lore, anything like that. Now, in terms of power picks, I'll go ahead and talk about the standouts once again in my recommendations. Number one, I would suggest Jacko and her artifact, both very strong in the current meta. Best pick overall between both collabs is Jacko right now. Elphelt very strong too, because of mainly her artifact. Ms.Confille is very strong, and Elphelt, if you like her, is definitely viable. Last pick here, if we're talking about just the Guilty Gear Lab, pick between Baiken or Dizzy, whichever one's more of your favorite. I mentioned both artifacts, definitely not needed at all, and neither unit in general is just needed in the current state of the game. Don't forget, once again, I'll probably post it in the comment too, if they add things like reworks, buffs, exclusive equipments, all this could be thrown on its head, kind of like how Jacko went from being a pretty bad unit to being an amazing unit. Now, the other standouts I want to mention from the ReZero collab, guys, Emilia. Emilia I mentioned, other Soul Weavers people are opting for that have either different strengths or just fit the current meta better. She's not the best Soul Weaver right now, but her artifact is so powerful. Guardian Ice Crystals, set aside some powder and maybe even spend some coins to pity more copies of that artifact because it is so good. I definitely am going to pick up more of that artifact if I can. And then Rem, probably the second best pick overall. Her artifact not amazing, but Rem herself, very strong PvE in terms of one-shotting Wyvern and very strong PvP, especially to fight units like Jacko. All right, guys, we'll wrap things up there. If you have any more specific questions based on your account and things like that, you want to hit me up one-on-one, just hit me up on Twitch, and I'll be happy to answer every single one of y'all's questions. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out, guys.